I expected very little.
Yeah. That's encouraging, though.
Yeah.
For this event, it'll just be the panelists who are in presenter mode.
Yes.
Should I turn it off for myself right now?
Whenever you're ready. There's no rush. We have like another 12 minutes. But
okay, yeah. I still have some food to eat, so maybe I'll
You
still
can
be in the
go
call,
up.
but I'll turn off presenter mode.
Sounds good.
Okay.
I'm still in the other meeting sharing my screen, so I just want to.
I don't want to disturb you. That's it. I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay. Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you. We're waiting on a couple other people, so once they come in, I'll bring them in as a speaker, and we'll see the team start to trickle in a little after 1, and we'll get started. Lily, do you have the questions?
Yeah, I do. I actually just jotted down some kind of notes and stuff just so that I can keep track.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Do you know if some of the sessions are recorded?
Yeah, everything's recorded.
Okay.
Yeah. And we won't share this unless you guys all specifically agree to it. So it'll be like everyone has to agree for it to be shared.
That makes sense.
I'm going to mute myself just while I finish coordinating everything, and then I'll chime back in here soon.
Okay.
Thanks. Hi, Sally.
Hey, Kayla.
How are you?
Good. Okay. Testing out camera. Okay.
Awesome.
I have like an external camera, so I'm like, okay. Looks like I'm talking to people, not looking down or anything. So
It looks good, yeah.
perfect. I had some issues this morning where I was like turning out to be a black box. So I'm like, ugh.
That's not good. It's always that external camera that you always fight with, but has the best quality.
Yeah. How's the event going?
Really well. Yeah, thanks for asking. We've had quite a few awesome keynotes this morning and some workshops, and now we're just heading into the panels and are packed until 5. So we're having really good feedback, which is great.
It's awesome. How many people do you guys have altogether?
I think about like 36 have been like active. We had 60 register, so it's
Which
cool.
is normal.
Normal for people to come and not fully engage, but so far those that are here that are super engaging, and that's pretty much all that we can ask for. So
yeah, no, totally. What I was gonna say was I forget, and you might have told me this. There's other panels going on at the same time, right?
Just
so
one.
Yep. Oh, just one. Okay, so it should be pretty small group, anyways. For questions.
It'll be an intimate group. Yeah.
It's funny because Beth and I was just looking at your questions, and I had dinner with Beth because she just moved to Halifax, and she's like, "Oh, we're on the same panel," and I'm like, "Oh, we are." so we did actually notice.
After we confirmed both of you, I looked on Facebook and you were both. I saw your jumping photo and I was like, "Oh my gosh, what a coincidence!"
Like I'm really good friends with Beth, right? Like it's hilarious because I think a week ago when you were doing like the tech check, I was like, I saw her email come across. I was like, "Oh, we're at the same event." Like, so I had it, and she's like, "We are? No, we're not." I was like, "Oh, whatever." Like, because she was speaking on a bunch of events, and then she told me yesterday. She's like, "Oh yeah, we're on the same panel." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
That's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, so
it's a small world for sure.
Yeah, like, and her and I will work off each other pretty good, and she'll be like, I don't know Lily at all, but a lot of the like the two of them, because I'll say like in some ways like they're like active entrepreneurs currently running their own ventures and stuff, that they'll like, I'll weave into like my past experiences they're working with entrepreneurs, but that stuff will definitely be better from them and all that. So
well, I thought you would bring a beautiful perspective too, because you have like a unique perspective that's pretty across the board when it comes to entrepreneurship. So
yeah.
But I will introduce you to Lily. Actually, Lily, I'm not sure. I'm surprised you guys haven't met, but Lily, this is Sally. She used to live in Fredericton, and I worked with her in Jedi.
Hi, Lily.
Lily's actually an Indigenous woman herself.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. We follow you on social media.
I was gonna say, I was like, I've definitely seen messages because I was like, I forget, because you guys started doing some meals in Halifax, I think.
Yeah.
I haven't ordered anything yet.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah,
in Halifax there.
Good. Yeah. No, it's pretty. I think everything's in all the COVID stuff in New Brunswick has calmed down, so it's nothing crazy.
Yeah.
Altogether, but yeah, nothing major. It's all pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I heard that they're actually going to reopen the maritime bubble soon.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I hope they do. Yeah. So, hey.
Hi, Bethany.
Hey, stranger. I was saying to Kayla that you told me that we were on the same panel yesterday, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we
are." That's so funny.
Yeah.
How's everyone?
Doing well.
My dog's.
I like your haircut.
Thank you. It's my COVID haircut.
It's a good. Yeah.
I didn't cut my hair for like a year, and by the time I got to the hairdresser, I was like so done with. Yeah.
Snip it off. Yeah, take it all off.
I lost the email with the questions, and I'm trying to find it now.
I will reshare it.
Okay, thank you.
Sally, do you need it reshared with you as well?
I've got it opened. I'll get it.
Sally is responsible.
I opened it 10 minutes ago.
Thank you for those who are listening, who are spectators listening. I appreciate you guys jumping in. So we're going to get started here in a couple minutes as we allow for more people to sign in and join us on this panel.
Awesome.
Beth, that's coming your way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
this is like a great little great topic. Been following a bunch of it's more International Women's Month, I would say,
Yeah.
than day. So,
Yep. Very true.
I don't think I realized that March was Women's History Month until this year. Yeah.
Yeah, you always like. There's so many of them now too.
Yeah,
I find it's hard to follow.
it is.
I'm part of another group with where Beth is as well with Canada 51, and so they're very like their content is amazing for like women entrepreneurs, and I'm doing their financial feminist investing lab is what it's called, and they've had lots of different resources and all that.
Nice. Canada 51.
Canada 51, yeah.
It's the 51 is the web. I think it's the 51.io.
See it. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, or there's .com. There's also coming up for me. So
Okay.
yeah, they're an awesome group, and they send out. They're like how I figure out so many of these different things, and have such a like kick-ass approach to it. The way they do all this, and so it's been really. I've only gotten to know them the last few months, but it's been really cool.
And I just started their course last week. And so I'm just starting to, and then that's a group of basically women across the country that want to jump into the investment space to change the stats around women in that demographic. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we're going to get started if that's good with everyone. We have more people trickling in. So yeah, I think this is a good time to jump into things. Thank you so much for our panelists who are on today. I'll do a quick introduction and also give you time to introduce yourself a bit more, as well as all of our participants who are joining as spectators and listening in. Participants, just a reminder, please remember that you can ask questions in the chat box or the specific Q&A. I will verbalize it or share it specifically. Any of the panelists can answer as they please. But to get started, you are now in the Courage to Create Your Own Opportunities panel number 2, which focuses on women in entrepreneurship. So this panel focuses on how women in entrepreneurship have created their own opportunities to get to where they are today. We'll learn how they got to start their own career, some challenges they've faced, successes they've achieved, and advice on they have for women looking to grow their own career as an entrepreneur themselves or in the realm of entrepreneurship. So I'd like to introduce to you guys, we have Lily Lynch here, who is the co-founder of Sankara, Bethany Deshpande, who is the CEO of SomaDetect, and Sally Ng, who is the Senior Director of Partner Success at Highline Beta, and she also has a company on her side called The Triple Effect. So what I think I'll do is I'll give you all in that order a couple minutes to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your company, and kind of how your role fits in entrepreneurship before I dive into the questions. Does that work?
Yeah.
Perfect.
So my name is Lily Lynch. I am located in New Brunswick. I became an entrepreneur by mistake, just through experiences in life. I was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia, to a single mom, and my father is Black and Mi'kmaq, Indigenous. And moving to New Brunswick, I realized that it's far more homogenous. And I wanted to just see what advancements I could make and what community participation I can create around culture. So I started a food business around African food because my business partner was from Nigeria. And this idea sort of snowballed into creating an online marketplace where all vendors from walks of life can create their culture, sell their culture, and make impact in the community. And so that's where we are today, about 4 years later, with an online multicultural marketplace, which is called Sankara cuisine.com, where there's vendors from every different continent, hyperly located in your community, who sell their food or their craft or their cultural knowledge to their community and aims to make roots, settle down, get people to know them better, and build more empathy. So that's where I am in my business. And I'm really fortunate to be involved. And as a multiracial person and a light-skinned person, I also realize the privileges that I have to be able to bring this company to the forefront and provide other opportunities for the women that we're also working with. Most of the vendors on our platform are women as well.
So cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and I guess welcome. And yeah, so cool to hear your story, Lily. Mine is similar. I'm a bit of an accidental entrepreneur. Started this company out of Fredericton, New Brunswick in 2016, mostly as a sort of, side project, fun thing. I thought I would, do this on weekends and have two co-founders that were kind of up for that task. And then, of course, it ended up being quite a bit bigger than a weekend project. I'm based at the moment in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And yeah, and so we are building, it's a sensor system that fits into dairy equipment, and we provide ongoing measurement and monitoring of milk quality and animal health parameters for dairy farmers. And yeah, working in agriculture, it's not something I have an educational background in or grew up on a farm. And so have definitely learned a ton from farmers, from existing leaders in the industry. And but yeah, working for farmers with farmers is I always say, one of the best things you can do. They're wonderful people that are making food for all of us. And so it's a cool place to find myself.
Awesome. So to kind of jump things off, one thing I'll just mention, like, Lily, love what you're doing. I'm originally from Malaysia, and so finding like ethnic local foods is huge. And so I think that's a huge opportunity space that you're tapping into. Knowing Beth as well, I think before we were chatting about Beth and I know each other, I think Beth's being a little humble. She just went public a couple of days ago that she closed a $6 million round. Yes. And so for context, it's like definitely some virtual high fives and everything when it comes to that. And I know like Kayla as well, thanks for the invite, because I know Kayla and I have known each other for a little while, and Kayla was working with me with the Triple Effect in the early days when we were running this Indigenous business incubator for Indigenous entrepreneurs across New Brunswick. And so my background's pretty random. Like I said, I'm originally from Malaysia. I grew up in Fredericton, and that's where I really got involved with the startup ecosystem. So I was a founding executive director for an entrepreneurship center called Planet Hatch in Fredericton. And so I was running accelerators, incubators. I've had the opportunity to travel globally volunteering with an organization called Techstars Startup Weekend, in which really got me exposed to entrepreneurs and communities all like in every corner of the world. And so I wanted to basically bring that home to Atlantic Canada. And so with my previous business that isn't as really active now, the Triple Effect and DigiLearn was always around that. So I would help other communities such as Newfoundland or PI launch different initiatives to basically support entrepreneurs. Now what I do is I'm working with a venture capital fund called Highline Beta. And so we're based out of Toronto, but since COVID, I moved east. So now I'm in Halifax as well, since my heart is definitely on the East Coast for sure. And so through that, what we do is we work with corporate innovation organizations, so Fortune 1000 companies. So think of them as Aviva, Intuit, Anheuser-Busch, these large corporations that actually want to work with startups. Because we know that when it comes to the world that we live in, as much as we want to admit it or not, large corporations hold a lot of that wealth and a lot of that power when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation. And a lot of startups and entrepreneurs don't have a way into it. And so not only are we a VC fund, which will invest in companies, but we play matchmaker between the corporations and the startups to enable that collaboration. And one little thing I'll mention too, because it might come up, is on the side, I'm pretty heavily involved in the philanthropic and community foundations world through some of my volunteer work. So happy to sort of talk about that merger of, I'll say, passion, what you do for free, and also what the pieces that hopefully gives you a paycheck on that side.
Thank you guys so much. That's fantastic. And I am so like, I can see myself as like the person on the other end listening to you speaking. I'm like, I don't know if I get to be the moderator here. I want to learn from you guys more and more, but it's really awesome to have you join the panel. So I know some of you actually mentioned, I know Beth and Lily, you kind of mentioned you accidentally jumped into entrepreneurship, but was there any other notes that anyone wanted to mention about how you got started and what kind of steps you took to jump into this? And feel free just to anyone chime in.
Yeah, I'm happy. So I had many different, now that I realize our entrepreneurial, at the time I would have never said I was an entrepreneur. And I think it took me at least 2 or 3 years into SomaDetect to actually be able to say, like, I, Bethany, am an entrepreneur. And we can talk a lot about imposter syndrome and all of that stuff as well. But I had actually done what I now acknowledge as like so many other entrepreneurial things. And I think we all do, right? Anytime you go and create something in the world, I love the title of this conference so much, Kayla, because I think entrepreneurship, making a company is it's the same thing as making other things, that that are an art. So like a painting or a recipe or any of these kinds of things, just on a slightly different scale and slightly different ingredients that go into it. But I had done like freelance web and web design and programming, like development, for a number of years. I started in about 2000, 2001, and just kind of kept getting side gigs and doing bigger and bigger projects through that. And so it was a way that started to sort of make some side cash, but turned into, was my full-time summer employment most years, and all that kind of stuff. And even then I wouldn't have called myself an entrepreneur, because I was like freelancing and that kind of thing. And then I worked, I think many of you know this, but I was part of the SHAD program at Laval University for 8 years, where I was, it's like a summer camp for high school students that want to build a business. And so guiding them through a lot of the processes around, idea generation, product market fit, some teamwork and leadership aspects as well. And all of that gave me lots of experience that then fed into everything I do at Soma.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think that's really interesting how you didn't self-label as an entrepreneur, even though you were creating your own means of existence through your work that was independent and driven only by you. I think that that's something that does occur quite a lot with women in entrepreneurship. A lot of the work that we do as women entrepreneurs, and in particular, the different intersecting qualities of, our womanhood. So our womanhood and our racial ethnicity, and our womanhood and our background or our religious affiliation or anything like that. All of those things come together in a very unified, orchestrated way, and we give to our communities and we create for our communities, and in order to uplift the people who we identify very strongly with and who we want to see supported and empowered. And it's just really interesting that in doing all of that work, we don't necessarily give ourselves the credit or lift ourselves up as, I'm doing this, I deserve the title of business owner and everything, and all the pressure that comes with that as well. I definitely identify with that sort of similar, in a smaller scale, of course, a similar way of just jumping into trying to create the opportunities that you want to see in the world, and create the impact that you want to see in the world, but not really looking for like clout, or not really looking for recognition or titles or anything, but just it's simply a means to create the world that you want to see and that you want to live in, and that you want to see other women supported and thriving within as well. So that was sort of part of our journey with Sankara too, in that we create the thing that we just really want to see exist in the world, and kind of leave titles to the wind.
Totally. I'll just add one little quick point, Kate, because I think it's such an important point. And I remember back in university, so this would have been like well over a decade ago, I ended up being in this competition called the New Brunswick Innovation Foundation. And it was this breakthrough competition that was for anybody that walked off the street, not just for students. Just as university students, like in the class, we were forced to write a business plan and compete in the competition. And the team that I was part of, we ended up winning it. So we won $125,000 in 10% investment from New Brunswick Innovation Foundation. And I remember I was reading a news article for Progress magazine at the time, and the lady kind of said to me, she's like, "What do you want your title to be? Like rock star?" Like she was hilarious. The editor was like, "Entrepreneur, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And I said to her, I was like, "I don't really care what you call me, just not entrepreneur." And I was very uncomfortable with it. She's like, "But you just started this new business." And I'm like, yeah, just like as an immigrant, like, and like seeing my family, what I didn't realize at the time was entrepreneurship, like especially 10, 15 years ago when the word startup wasn't used yet, entrepreneurship in some ways was this dirty word in my mind at the time, because what I saw was my parents coming to Canada and as immigrants, and no one would hire them. And they didn't actually have, I'll say, the clout or the experience. So entrepreneurship was their only way to actually help provide for their family. And so in my mind, as like this independent woman, I was like, someone's going to hire me. I'm like, why would I be an entrepreneur? That's for people that can't find a job. Not actually realizing entrepreneurship it's for people that actually want to action and put those dreams and passions to work, which is so ironic in terms of when you see people's journeys and the stuff that I do now.
Yeah, totally wild to hear these perspectives.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And I'm glad that we have like 3 different perspectives too, because entrepreneurship is so undefined in that sense, where like even my story will be different from the 3 of you. So it's crazy to have this kind of experience in this panel. I think it's really, really exciting as like a fangirl for you guys. My next question is, what has your experience been like so far building your career as a woman entrepreneur?
This is always such a difficult question to answer, because I don't know what it is to build a business as a male entrepreneur, right? I don't know what the other side necessarily looks like. Of course, I think that's one of the challenges that you get with diversity, is that you inherently have these different perspectives. Every perspective is unique, and I'm sure so many different things go into that beyond gender or race or, whatever it may be. I think there are probably in that some challenges that female entrepreneurs face that a male entrepreneur definitely, doesn't necessarily experience, and vice versa. But yeah, I would say I feel incredibly grateful to so many of the people that have like come around to support women entrepreneurs. We're talking about the 51, just as we were getting started. There's such a wonderful group of people that are supporting feminist finances and women entrepreneurs. I think there's so many of these. And so, yeah.
Jump in a little bit. So when I think of like women and entrepreneurs, right? Like I think it also is a broader piece where if we actually want to talk the challenges or barriers or issues when it comes to women, there's this power piece that I think people tend to, I guess they don't address like head on type of thing, because it's like entrepreneurship at the end of the day gives us power, and power is not necessarily a bad thing. And so I think when it comes to women and entrepreneurs, like I love seeing more and more women get involved, because then it actually starts to shift the power of building the companies that we care about, that aligns with our passions, that aligns with our values. And that's okay, right? Like I'm sure some of the very insecure individuals that see maybe power shifting might get a little defensive, which I'm sure all of us have experienced. But to me, that's like even more reason that we should, until those defenses or negativity get squashed. I don't think the world will change. And so I know I'm being a little fluffy with it, but I think it's the shifting of the power. It's the same as when we were working with BIPOC communities or underrepresented communities and entrepreneurs, that I think we have to be just mindful of how we're doing it. And at the end of the day, the reason why we are.
Definitely agree, and can kind of piggyback off of what both Sally and Bethany just said, which, hard to add to to those 2 excellent answers. But I think that there is a tendency for maybe women to not want to like walk into that power or assume the power, or some nervousness around it, because we don't necessarily, and as a BIPOC woman, we don't necessarily see ourselves represented. So I think the companies that we create, especially, businesses by marginalized people, the businesses we create kind of address this. The business is by us and it's for us, and like kind of the nothing about us without us mentality of we need to be the ones in the positions, in executive leadership, if that's something, a hierarchy that we go by, because in business, we always talk about C-suite or, different positions of power, and how much autonomy and how much of what you put forward, determines or aligns with where the company goes. But we need to be the ones in the driving position in order to create the companies that we want to see and create the change that we want to see. So I think that out of a lot of necessities, such as your example, Sally, there's a necessity of there are no other opportunities where we can see ourselves in companies or in corporate life or in certain industries that are typically white male dominated industries. Like maybe, 10 years ago, engineering, you wouldn't see as many, women of color engineers or Black male engineers. So the space of business really allows that creativity and that openness to create the community and create the conditions that you want to see your population, because likely you're solving a problem that you intimately face, or that faces and impacts your community. So creating a business allows us to walk into the power to create the change that our community can then benefit from. And it's very intentional, and it's very active, and it's not a passive decision, really, even though we might just think we're creating a company, or we're creating a movement, or we're creating opportunity. It's very intentional. At the end of the day, every single day, everything you do is very intentional and directed towards benefiting the community that you serve. And in our case, it's a community that looks like us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just added a link as well, because I think it's such an important point, Lily. And I think all of us have to be more educated and be intentional with it. Not that I'm trying to promote Highline Beta whatsoever, because it was IWD yesterday, but one of our general partner, who's one of the very few female VCs in Canada, she posted a really good blog yesterday that highlights a lot of those. And like the title of it is "Our Future and Economy Loses When Women Leave Power and Wealth on the Table." So I think it's like bang on in terms of some of the pieces that that's come up.
Yeah.
I think Kayla was in there. Well, Kayla's coming back. On the chat there, feel free, for any of the folks that have joined us, feel free to post any intros. Oh, Kayla, I think you're back.
Still here. I have a million.
Oh, oh no. She disappeared.
Now we really lost her.
Yeah, and so the Canada 51 link, I don't know what that is necessarily. And then the financial feminist literacy, did I remember that correctly, Sally?
Yeah, for sure. I'll post the links there that Beth was just mentioning. Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yeah, there's the Canada 51 one. And then through that site, you'll find the financial feminist investing lab. That's what it's called. They just launched the pilot program. And so I don't know when the next one will be just yet. But yeah, it'll be really shortly after that. And feel free, like for any of the attendees, like post any questions, introduce yourselves in the chat so that we can align any of our questions more to your interests as well and backgrounds. Kayla, you're back.
Hi. I knew this would happen at some point today. My computer loves to just fall apart. Thanks for your patience, everyone. And thanks, Sally, for, I love that you always know how to just jump in. Appreciate it.
I also wanted to add another thing, and I think it might be specific to the food and beverage industry in Canada as I'm kind of looking at this, but this website was just launched on Monday called We Are Women, and it's grants, mentorship, and interview series and initiatives and support for women, BIPOC women in the food and beverage industry. So I just posted that there too.
I love it. Thank you. And please feel free to share as much as you need. Panelists and participants, we'd love to share that kind of content. It's fantastic. Awesome. My next question, what kind of barriers did you face and how did you overcome them in entrepreneurship? Maybe Sally can go first.
Sure. I think for me, it's funny. I think back, I don't necessarily think of them as barriers. Like my mindset always been like I think everyone has barriers depending on their backgrounds and the privilege that they come and all of that. I think early in my career, so I went to school to be a commercial pilot. And so obviously you can imagine that industry is 5 or 10% female. I also went through the Air Cadet program as a kid. So then you have the military side, which is also 5 to 10%. And I've been involved in those programs since I was 12. So I've always been in actually that tiny 10% of male dominated, I'll say, communities, which has sometimes like made me realize how thick my skin is, I guess, to some extent. And also the BS that I dealt with and kind of just shrugged aside. And so I'd say one of the barriers, even for me, just as I've grown as a person the last couple of years, is realizing that some of those barriers or the thick skin that I've developed, it isn't always a good thing. Like if something and someone says something that is totally sexist or inappropriate, 5-10 years ago, I probably never would have said anything. Now, depending on the environment, do I bring it up all the time? Well, it depends. But now I think one of those barriers is actually for myself to realize when they actually are sexist and when they're actually not appropriate, and actually calling it out and knowing how to call it out in a right way that doesn't get that person to say like, oh, she's just a crazy person, right? So I think the barrier, yes, it's external, but it's also a barrier of educating myself to know what's appropriate and what's not. Because we've all been conditioned to deal with, we've all been conditioned, I would say, to deal with sexism. And we oftentimes don't realize that it is, or racist comments.
Yeah, I think that's great. I've gotten better over the years at like responding to those things with just by asking questions. Like, what do you mean by that? Can get you a really long way. Facing that with curiosity, is allows you to have that conversation that oftentimes does need to be had and all that stuff. Yeah, I think my reaction to this question was like, where do you want to start? Like, I think there's no end to barriers in entrepreneurship. I think, like SomaDetect is requires, is a tech startup. And so the, fundraising has always been one of my key focuses as a CEO, and sort of keeping the dollars in the business to keep it running and all those kinds of things. And fundraising can definitely be really challenging. There is so much to learn about, shares and term sheets and, the lingo that I knew nothing about when I started. And so that's been part of the journey that I think part of the nobody plans to learn those things, or I didn't plan to learn those things, certainly. And ended up being a really critical piece that I needed in order to, keep building the company I wanted to build. I think there's kind of barriers you'll run into as you learn about yourself, as a leader, as you learn about yourself, and see, sometimes you'll have made a decision, like I've run into this all the time. I've made a decision a year ago that actually doesn't serve me today and that I need to fix or undo or whatever, or change. And so I think that's been a big part of, my journey as well. Like sometimes the barriers are very much self-inflicted, are ones that I put there or that I thought was the right thing that ends up not at all being the right thing, and having to change that. And all of that calls you to be a different person, right? Calls you to be someone you weren't before, and make decisions you didn't make a year ago or 3 years ago or whatever it may be that need to be made now. And those are all tough moments where you discover a different part of yourself, a different strength in yourself that you may not have known that you had.
Definitely can concur, on some of these points for sure. I think, in listening to your answer, Bethany, I'm hearing that there are also some historic barriers, for me at least, historic barriers being not seeing other women who look like me doing the thing that I'm doing. And so not being able to learn from the previous someone or history or a business who's done it before, so that I can look to learn the mistakes and to learn the successes, so that those things are not repeated in my own company and in our own growth. But in terms of the barriers put on by yourself, I think that there are many ways that myself as a more introverted person, as a softer spoken person, as a younger person, there are barriers that society puts on me and how I should show up and what a business person is and how we network and how we show up for making new business opportunities or doing business to business talks or meetings that I just don't want to live up to because they don't serve me anymore. So I think that there's been a lot of learning about myself and about the way that I show up in my business that have to do with just brushing off those expectations and showing up exactly how I need to show up for my company and for all the people that I represent. So I think that those are some interesting dialogues that I do have with myself as well. But another barrier, I think, is that we are not necessarily talking about all the opportunities that are available to women entrepreneurs. For some reason, if you ask the right person the right question in an economic development organization, maybe they'll provide you with the right resource that you're looking for. But it's like you need to do extra work on top of trying to run your business, keep on top of everything, raise money, you make sure that you're creating capital and you're creating impact and you're generating revenue. If you want any resources related to opportunities for women in business, because there are plenty, you have to ask the right person who almost has to be in the right mindset to provide you with the resources that you need. Because I mean, just in our early part of our conversation, I learned about the 51 and other resources that I didn't know existed. So it's just barriers in terms of access to information, I also think is a big issue, but also an opportunity, a tremendous opportunity.
I think that's such a great point. And one of the things I did early in the company, and then I actually stopped doing it, and I've recently started doing it again, but it's just keeping a running list of like, what are my top barriers or bottlenecks? If someone were to solve these 10 things, like what would that mean for the company? And have those always, somewhere visible, somewhere where you can see them, so that you're asking all the, your aunts and uncles, your mentors, people at conferences like this, like what are your top 3 barriers, and can we help you solve any of them? And that was something, it's not always easy to ask for help, and it's not always easy to find exactly the right person in exactly the right mindset to like pose those questions and actually get the info that you need. But that info is out there. And so, sometimes it's like brute forcing your way.
That's such a good point. Like one of the things, I'll say one of the tactics that I've learned actually recently through one of these feminist investing labs is they would bring up these scenarios, right? Like Lily, you're talking about some of the like the barriers that people do and other people put onto us. I don't know how many people have heard about like preventative questions versus promotional questions that women get asked a lot of times. So what this best example would be, let's say you're a tech company and you're pitching to a bunch of investors. What common questions that women get, and there's science and research backed on it, is that women tend to get the question that's like, what are you going to do when someone steals your IP, like your intellectual property? Like, what are you going to do when like an employee goes, like, they're very negatively slanted versus.
And it comes from like, they want you to foresee and be planning for every possible risk and like how to do that when nobody does that. No human being in the universe.
Totally, 100%, right? And like, it's a lot of times, but the irony of it is that they don't ask men the same types of questions. They tend to ask men a question of, can you tell me about your IP strategy? It's like, why do women get the negatively slanted preventative questions and women get the preventative, and the men get the promotion? And so one little quick trick I said that somebody brought up the other day was, if you are, let's say, an entrepreneur and you notice that they're asking these questions that are very negatively slanted, before you answer it, rephrase it. So if someone asks me, hey, like, what are you going to do when someone steals your IP? How you answer it is, oh, are you asking about my IP strategy? that's how you reword it and then answer it. And I do it because it's really hard, right? Because the only thing that you can have full control over when it comes to overcoming barriers is your own behavior. And so I think we all have to be more conscious of it and how we're speaking and how to rephrasing it. And the other thing I kind of mentioned, like Bethany, when you talk about your list of barriers, I also used to do, I would call it my learning list. So every quarter or so, at the front of my notebook, I would literally have a list of things that I wanted to learn. And usually it's because there was a barrier. So like, I need to learn more about pitching. I need to know how to design. And they're very tactical things. And then that would keep me sort of motivated because I'm not learning it. Maybe some things are just learning for fun, but some of them are, I'm learning it because I actually need to know how to read my financial statements. And it would keep me grounded, and it would also help guide me along on who else I would talk to. So if I said like financials, for example, was one of mine, I'm like, okay, I know I went to business school, but like, does not mean I'm strong on the numbers. And so I'd be like, I need to understand how to read my financial statements in a really good way for me to grow my business. And then from there, it's top of mind. And so all of my other conversations with mentors or friends would always weave back to it. And so everything starts being a little bit more interconnected.
Thank you. That's fantastic. I actually I never thought of it like that, preventative versus promotional, and like how you would turn the question around. I think that's really interesting, and definitely I see how useful that is. So thank you for that. On the opposite side of barriers, the next question, I think it's important that we also talk about our successes and our wins. So as women entrepreneur, what kind of successes have you achieved, and how did you achieve them?
I raised $6 million. I did that by taking every preventative question you could throw at me and turning into something promotional. I definitely, felt that so much through the raise, and
Huge congratulations. Because I remember, Bethany, I was watching your live stream
this was way before that. Kayla, when I don't even know, 3, 4, 5 years ago, came with me and the Soma team. At that point, we were like 4 or 5 people around dozens of dairy farms through Vermont to get people to sign like letters of intent to purchase, and like learning about issues on farm and in the market. And I always look back at that trip just so fondly. It was such a fun part of the company. And yes, so many of those things we did in the early days absolutely have, rolled on to the successes that we have today. And so
it's so inspiring to have seen that. And I'm actually so grateful that I got to tag along to the dairy farms, not knowing that would ever be part of my career journey. But thank you. Like, that was fantastic.
My pleasure. I didn't know what we were doing. We were like, we were all in this mode of like play and experimentation and just kind of seeing where it would take us. And so, yeah.
Well, we're starting in your favor. 6 million. Congratulations. Awesome.
Because I've been following your journey as well. Like, you were working with Joanna Killen, and I was just learning and hearing about like everything that your company was doing, with great admiration and, cheering on from the sidelines. But I know certain things are, still have to be kept undisclosed, but what can you tell us about the process, like more behind the success of how you were able to raise that, if possible?
Yeah. I mean, what can I say? I feel like I have been perpetually raising money since the company began and trying to get cash into the business any way I could. So there, competition wins and lots of grants and loans from government, which have been really fantastic. And then I was raising money, like really small amounts at a time, essentially, just like, what do we need? What's the smallest amount we can take in order to keep building? And then during COVID, I actually was planning to do a Series A or try to do the Series A early in 2020. And then when COVID hit, I stopped. I changed to instead raising on a convertible note, a small amount of cash just to kind of breathe our way through the pandemic. And in that process, while I was raising money for this convertible note, I had a group of investors come forward and say, actually, this is so good. We want to lead your Series A. And so it was almost this, I had like stopped pushing in that direction. And that's when it happened. It was still, from that point, it was at least 6 months of term sheets and paperwork. And someone had given me the advice, actually had said, when you get the term sheet, like that's when the trouble begins. And I definitely, the amount of hours I have spent reading legal documents over the last 6 months, that is actually the thing I'm most proud of in a way, or where I've been able to learn so much, and something I never, like, I'm not a lawyer. I feel, legal docs are like really outside of my area of comfort essentially, but it's that like every single person in my team is willing to like roll up their sleeves and do what needs to be done in order to get things done. And that was when I needed to do that. And so, we end up with 3 really big strategics involved as investors in our company, as well as just this wonderful army of really supportive, like kick-ass funders. And so it could not be, I feel so grateful for the people that have come forward or come around to be part of Soma and help us build this business. There are so many dairy farmers and dairy industry folks involved as well, that I feel like when I have industry questions, I have people to ask. When I have entrepreneurial or operational questions, I have folks I can ask. And yeah, it was a journey. I could talk about this for hours, probably, like just the sheer like work and some like you make tough decisions as you go through this, and what some of that was like. It really involved, so much of my time, so much of our executive team time as well. Like it was not a solo process by any means. And so, yeah, I hope that answers your question. Maybe that was rambly.
It's really exciting to hear the entire process, and the excitement in your voice and the emotion, and you kind of were able to relay that story. So thank you.
Thank you.
Lily, did you maybe want to talk about some of your successes?
I think talking about successes is really uncomfortable for some. I don't know. It's a weird thing. And I can hear that in you as well, like kind of the hesitancy while you're more comfortable in sharing your story now. And thank you very much for doing that. I think women, I don't know, we're very critical of ourselves and what it is that we hope to achieve. We're idealistic. We have great big dreams. And it's no different for me in my company. I think that the successes that we've had are plenty, and we do our best to try and take a moment to recognize them, every so often as a team. I think our greatest success is that through the pandemic, we've been able to grow. And I don't say this lightly. There have been so many companies that have been taken, in the undertow of the pandemic, and are not going to be resurfacing anytime soon. So I really don't say it lightly. I'm so grateful for the support and the willingness of all of our partner vendors to continue working and making it work through this time, and for all the customers that have been supporting us. But we have grown into 2 new cities through the pandemic. So I think our greatest success is that we are still breathing and surviving, which is sometimes a success that we all have to just take a moment and be grateful for. While it's not a really big win or anything like that, continuing and growing is always great. It wasn't too long ago that we applied for a Community Foundations of Canada grant too, that we were successful in receiving. So they believed in our application, and it was called the Gender Equality Grant. So we are going to be working to get our partner female immigrant chefs meals into like some retail locations. So we're very excited about that, very motivated. And a success is just having a really great team that believes in the vision and is willing to meet evenings and weekends and all crazy hours, because we are moonlighting on Sankara, some of us. So yeah, I think successes around future plans still existing today, despite the pandemic, are really the things that we take moments of reflection to be grateful for.
Amazing. And as a board member of Community Foundations of Canada, Lily, because we have hundreds of, like, there's a lot of them. I'm like, that's awesome that Sankara was one of the recipients. That's amazing. I think I'm really similar to Lily in the sense of celebrating successes is probably one of the hardest things for me, because there's I'll say vanity successes that people always want. And like, there's the images around like the iceberg, right? When it comes to successes, people just see that tip of that iceberg and they don't realize the craziness that actually got to that point, which I find that's oftentimes my life with it. I think my sort of, I'd say, success is in some way that's maybe a little bit more personal in respect to just my journey has been the programs or initiatives like volunteer or paid that in or touched. What's to me, what I see successful is when the entrepreneurs I work with or the individuals that I've worked with, like basically can like, sounds so cheesy, but like fly on their own, right? So like one of the businesses, which I know Kayla was involved in as well, is Wabanaki Maple. And they were one of the entrepreneurs I had the like great fortune to work with through the Indigenous Business Incubator. And like Jolene would say this publicly too, and I would say this to Jolene anytime, but she was one of these entrepreneurs that like the first day I met her, she was like, I have a maple syrup company, right? Like that's all she would say as an individual entrepreneur. And now fast track a year and a half, 2 years later, I think it was a year later, she was doing like, I finally like worked with her very closely, got her ready to do global TV interviews, like CBC interviews. And I was just like, and I give her, because she's probably like, not that I pick favorites, but maybe I do, of all the entrepreneurs I've worked with, she's one of the ones that definitely gives me that, I'll say like heartfelt feeling in terms of being like, okay, I was a little ripple in that journey, in that respect. And like, and so those are the things that I find I'm oftentimes reflecting on. I haven't done it lately and I just remembered it, but when I had a bunch of summer students working on DigiLearn, I actually had a little bulletin board and we called it the happy moments. And so literally it was like every time we had a little celebration or success, we would write it on a little sticky note and stick it on the wall on that bulletin board. And it was just our happy moments. Because when you're on that entrepreneurial journey, or just even if you're not an entrepreneur, your mental health and just like sometimes it gets a little bit negative. I think potentially women don't celebrate as much. So being able to look to that wall and be like, man, there's these happy moments and these little successes that we've had, totally makes everyone feel better.
Yeah, thank you. I know that's a hard question, so that's why we chose to actually put that one in there, because it challenges kind of what we're doing here today with this conference. So thank you all for answering that honestly. We don't have too much time left, so I'm going to ask one more question, and then as I ask this question, if people can pop their questions into the chat box, that would be fantastic. But if everyone can quickly give a little piece of advice that you would give to a woman who's looking to grow their career in entrepreneurship, what would that piece of advice be? And then once we get through that, I'd love to open the question up, the floor up to the participants or the spectators. So anyone that wants to go first can dive right in. What is your
say? One of my favorite marketers that I follow is Seth Godin. Actually, I'm just realizing I follow a lot of male marketers like Seth Godin and the Ask Simon Sinek and those kinds of folks. So if anyone knows any female marketers that I should be following, like, please let me know. But Seth Godin always says, like, ship now, like you're not perfect, doesn't ever come. And as women, I think there's so much external societal pressure of how we're supposed to appear and how we're supposed to show up and the way that we're supposed to act and move through the world, that we're always waiting for this very particular moment that we're going to have some, conception of this is the right moment and I'm ready to ship my work, or I'm ready to, market my product, or I'm ready to go and bring it to market. But just ship what you have, and then you can reiterate and improve on it later, because people want to see what you have and they want to experience what it is that you have. There's no perfect moment. Just ship the work that you have, create it and reiterate on it, refine on it. And that's the best advice that I would give to any entrepreneur.
I can go next, or Sally, you can go next.
You can.
I'll tag mine onto Lily's, but I think start with whatever is the tiniest, smallest smidgen of thing you can, whatever the smallest effort you can do, and get that thing going. Even if it means, even if it's just for yourself, or even if it's just for your family, and then grow that, because it's so much easier to grow once you're started, once you like build yourself that momentum. And I think, for us at Soma, that was a big part, go knock on the door of a farm and like see where that gets you. And all those little things really do add up down the road.
I think those are such really good points. My sort of like biggest word of advice, I think, comes from like years ago, which this was like the very first conference I ever went to as like a working professional, new grad type of thing. And IT event. And I remember there was this panel of amazing women with like incredible backgrounds. Like one was who was like deputy premier to Frank McKenna. Like you had these kick-ass women, and they were literally sitting on this panel and talking about mentorship and blah, blah, blah. And I had the guts at the time, and I got up and I said to them, my question was, your guys' backgrounds are amazing, and you say to just ask for mentorship. But I was like, as like a new grad and like a 20-year-old, I'm like, you guys intimidate the hell out of me. I didn't quite say it that way, but like basically is what I was alluding to. I was like, there's no way that I'm going to like just totally reach out to you, right? At the time, the women didn't actually give me a very good answer on the panel when I asked my question. But what happened afterwards was that one of them, Aldea Landry, she actually came up to me and was like, hey, and I had no idea her background, right? Like she's gotten like the Governor General Award. Like she's very like top 100 most powerful women in Canada. I didn't know that at the time. She came up to me and was like, hey, Sally, I'm Aldea. I'll be your mentor. How about we go out for a coffee? And I was like, okay. Like, right. Like it was like, this is like the 21-year-old little Sally being like, oh my God. And like to this day, like she has been one of my top mentors and people. So I'll say one thing is like, never be afraid to ask, but more importantly, start building out your, I'll say board of advisors is how I've said it before, is like, it doesn't mean that you have to meet with these people every single week or every single month. Maybe the word mentorship, some people aren't not familiar, they're not comfortable with. That's okay. It's just a coffee chat, right? Like if I wanted to talk to someone about, hey, raising around, I'd be like, hey, Bethany, can you do this, right? Like if I wanted something about food business, I'm like, hey, Lily, can we chat about this? Or launching an online store, things like that. It's that start thinking about, let's say those maybe 10 or so people in your bigger network that you can start reaching out to as your advisors, and they'll switch, right? It's not just because you pick someone now doesn't mean they'll be the same people in a year. And because that network also amplifies as you go along. So even if they can't answer your question, if you point them back to your learning pieces, you can always say like, well, what else would you like to know? Or do you know anyone else that could help me with that? Would be my sort of advice.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Are there any questions for the last 5 minutes of the panel that anyone wants to ask? Anyone in the audience? Feel free just to jump in and toss it into the chat box and we can ask everyone here. If I don't get a question, I'm going to ask another one.
Hi.
I feel like people might be typing. Also, thank you for all the fantastic engagement you guys are putting in the chat box here. It's been super helpful. Okay, I'm going to ask.
Well, Kayla's coming back. Lily, I did post it to somebody on Twitter there. That's female, and she's awesome. Oh, Kayla, you're back.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Not back.
So now over to the audience.
One comment by Sarah Alston, and she was speaking to, hearing our perspective on what it means to play a leading or founding role in the businesses. And I think just generally through the questions, we probably did answer that. But yeah, Sarah, if you want to know anything, further, that would be great.
Oh, how do you handle adversity and doubt? That's a great question.
There's two parts to it, right? So doubt from which perspective? Your perspective, or when other people doubt you? I think is one big thing. I think there's, you can call it both. Okay. So like, I think there's that, people will call it like, what's it? The imposter syndrome, things like that. And I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, okay, fake it till you make it. Cause then I think all of us have probably been through that to some degree. But I think the more you start to test things out, like what's dangerous is if you're an entrepreneur and you're afraid to experiment, and knowing that when you do experiments, even if you're coming from a science background, whichever, like you fail at probably most of your experiments, and that's okay. And that's part of the learning piece with it. So I think how you handle it is by testing things. And like, hopefully, like you need to know as an entrepreneur, 90% of the time you are going to fail and be very comfortable with that. And you need to get back up and keep going. As you sort of learn more and more, you do tend to build that confidence. I know that sounds a little cheesy. Bethany and Lily, you guys can probably add more context to it, but that's all.
I don't think that's cheesy at all. And I think one of the things you have to recognize so there's two key things I've learned as a startup founder. Number one, like sometimes when you are doing well, it absolutely feels like failure because things, you build it a certain way, whatever, you build a thing and that thing runs along and chugs along until it is called to be, right? It has to be bigger. It needs more pieces or whatever. And as it goes through that pressure, it just inherently falls apart. Like shit happens. And so like you will go through failure on a fairly regular basis through your startup, through your venture. And that is kind like at one point I realized that's kind of what I signed up for. Like turns out that's where we're at. And so I have learned so much about like, I am one of these like, whatever, imposter syndrome, drowning, full of like perfectionism kind of folks where, I've just accepted that. I've accepted that sometimes I fail and that's okay. And I've also have the team around me that has like, they've seen me fall flat on my face more times than I'd care to admit. And I think that's part of how you grow kind of your team and how you grow your team, especially those early members, are so much part of your inner circle. They see you at your best and they see you at your worst moments. And you just have to become comfortable with that through necessity. I think in terms of the other question around doubt, one of the things I say all the time to entrepreneurs is like every single person out there will have some kind of perspective about who you are, who you're not, and what you should and should not be doing, right? But those people ultimately don't know you as well as you know you, and they don't know your business as well as you know your business. And so you just let them have those. People will come to you with all kinds of opinions and advice, and you will get, it's so much about gathering a breadth of advice and then being able to narrow down to the right places. It's not about, and so you'll get all kinds of doubt or people that are overexcited or whatever it may be. Like you just run into that, the whole gambit. And you have that within yourself as well, right? The self-doubt and the little voice inside yourself that chirps away saying, oh my gosh, Beth, what are you doing? Blah, 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 blah. It's there. And you learn to not listen to it and not choose something different, essentially, day after day.
Yeah, that's huge. We had one more question too, Lily.
Yeah, I think I definitely think it's not easy, like the fake it till you make it, idea. I think that there's two things that I wanted to add in terms of doubt and like that little voice in our head, both self-doubt and doubt that is coming externally and being reflected to us. I think that there's a trick that I learned just in researching like cognitive behavioral therapy, where you can have a visualization of all the thoughts that you have in yourself and at any given moment are like passengers on a bus. And so they come in to the bus, they travel with you for a time, but if you acknowledge them, you give them permission to actually exit the bus and no longer travel with you, you know, down the route that you're going, or they're just not helpful. They're not useful passengers. They can get the heck out. So that's definitely one. And then the other one is just a matter of supporting yourself with people who understand more intimately the company, the business, the vision that you have, instead of sort of people who think that they know what your company is about or think that they know what your pursuit is about. Because the more that you have those positive influences around you and the people who are there with you through the grit, through the crazy times, it's just more consistent. Their support is more consistent than the doubters who might be trying to impose their disbelief, or they're trying to dissuade you from doing what you want to do. And I think there's two words that I've been kind of living by this year. One is tenacity. And I think as entrepreneurs, we're all tenacious as heck. It's something that you really need to do, but tenacity is a more positive term than stubborn, which I think there's a lot of negative connotation around the term stubborn. So I believe we do everything with an abundance of tenacity as entrepreneurs, especially as women entrepreneurs. And the reason why we do that, at least the reason why I do that, is because I am absolutely disgusted by apathy, by human apathy. So I think that if we have more tenacity and we just, bull forward and do the thing that we are set out to do in the world, or live the passion that we're living in the world, there's no wrong step. There's not really any place for doubt. But I guess if people are doubting you, it means that they're not apathetic. They do have an opinion. So that's also maybe something that you could consider. But building a rapport with your team that's going to support you throughout, if there's doubt or no doubt, that's the best way to look internally and to your team for support instead of listening to the doubters.
Yeah. I think, Kayla, I know we're a little bit over time. I'll just really quickly in 10 seconds. Con, I think you're around balancing things between full-time schoolwork. And I think AA mentioned something about wanting to start being a consultant in your field one day, which I think probably those questions in some ways probably relate to each other when it comes to the balancing act between the two. One thing I'll say is own your calendar and own your energy in regards to time and place to do things. So if you Google productivity and energy management, I guarantee you'll get tons of different articles with it. And the whole overall mindset is trying to do everything all at a certain time doesn't necessarily work, right? There's in work and on work. And as an entrepreneur or someone that's trying to balance your life, you have to be a lot more conscious of it overall.
Thank you guys so much. And I'm sorry we don't have more time to talk, but before we officially close things up, is there any way that anyone can get a hold of you when you guys move on in your journey? Can we connect with you on LinkedIn?
Find me on LinkedIn. And so if you search me on LinkedIn, that's probably the easiest way to connect.
Yeah, same for me. That's wonderful. Thank you. It was great to have this conversation. Thanks everyone for your participation and all your questions. And if we're helpful in any small way, that's always a big win for me.
Yeah, thank you everyone for making time to be here today. And thanks for inviting me to this panel. I learned a lot.
Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you. And we are all going to head back to the main stage. If you guys have time, feel free to come back to the main stage and join us for our next workshop.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayla.
Have a great day.
Bye.